without an embalming. Now, here's a couple of things, and this is something I wanted to maybe give out to those people who want to be involved, because I'm going to encourage you later on to create a burial committee or a guild, whatever word you want to choose for it, people that are the go-to people in that event. That would be best spearheaded by Father Gregory as a spiritual advisor, like everything else in the parish. Since he doesn't have enough to do, we'll just add this to it. So, yeah, are you okay with that? He accepted it. He didn't say it. He accepted it. So that would be best spearheaded by Father Gregory and certain people in the parish that you feel that have the capacity, and those people feel comfortable with it. It shouldn't be something shoved off on people, but when you're coming across international borders, if you have a communicable disease, shoot out there really in the deep end, Ebola or hepatitis or something like that, then they, by law, will require embalming to come across international borders. Legally, you just cannot help that, because this is where the laws are. The CDC is under the impression that with the potential of embalming, you will help alleviate some of the infections or bacteria.
How do they know that? Just stated in the death certificate that you...
Exactly. Death certificate. The death certificate will be laid out, and it will state, the cause of death and the signing physician. However, those of us that live here in the U.S., there is no requirement to go across state border. No requirement. Now, check. If you move anywhere else, check with your local municipalities and local coroners and stuff. Because, and I should probably make this disclaimer at the beginning. Everything I'm telling you is based on the facts and knowledge that I have, but they will not 100% apply to every single situation, because there will be variables in that situation that can come up that will require an embalming to take place, or no public viewing under any circumstances because of potential of health hazard. So again, that would be the role of the professional, if you will, the coroner or the medical examiner who steps in and says, X, Y, and Z, we can't do this for these circumstances for the safety and health of other people. So, but overall, with those people coming across the border, you can avoid the embalming aspect if we're transported in what's called a hermetically sealed casket. And I've got, it's not a very good image of it, but this is a galvanized box, if you will. And it's got a top and it's sealed up and put together, and a person can be brought across the border and brought in, and then other preparations put in the casket, then buried.
And that's required for international burial, for an international situation?
To transport, not for burial, but transport.
I mean the transport.
Yes.
Okay.
From the CDC requires. Now, if there's someone's across visiting another country, you will have the consulate's office involved with that. And that can take a little bit of time. And 9 times out of 10, even when we had people going back to Israel, the Israeli government, since we most commonly know Jewish people don't embalm, they said, well, you're embalming. Simple. There was like, okay, because of the potential effects of altitude and other climate, humidity can have on the person, and it can create a noxious odor. That's about the best way I can put it. So this unit right here, and these things aren't regulated like caskets are. If you have a casket and a person, even a human being, live person laid in to see what they look like, that is considered a used casket, and it cannot be sold unless you disclose to the individuals, and you have to give a discounted price and tear out the entire lining of the inside and replace it. So, but this, however, is a transport of a human body, and I've been looking around trying to find them wholesale, and to get them wholesale, I just can't find anybody to do it, even from, because I'm not an authorized dealer. I work for a company that works as a contract. I think it costs about $1,200, but they will last you. They're not flimsy, they're heavy, and they're stout. So I have this information, I have some copies of this information, what the CDC requires, the limitations on that. Yes?
So what if you were transporting a body and you needed, a day, maybe 2 days from the time the person proposed to where you could actually be in the place that the body needed to be buried, the service and everything. So what, and you want to spare your loved ones, aren't orthodox of having to deal with, your body in a way that an orthodox person, would understand, but they don't. So is it even really, does it even make sense?
No, not, I mean.
You're not following me, so how do
Clarify a little bit more.
so how would
I mean, maybe
family
this
members
scenario-
prepare the body for transport when they're not orthodox?
Oh, okay, good question. In that situation, this guy, why he makes the big bucks, he'll step in, because there's a point in which Father Gregory, and also hopefully after this, some people will research and become part of that, the burial committee, whatever guild, that will be informed about that, so when the time comes, these people will be called upon, and they can instruct the family through the process. The first step is to make sure your family understand your wishes, like you said. And it can come, and a lot of times, this isn't something people romance. I mean, when I got into the industry, I was first selling cemetery property and funeral plans. I mean, people romance buying a car, a new ATV, a boat, going on vacation. Oh, let me plan for a funeral. People, we don't romance it in our society. And so if you can find a way to be able to approach it like you did, which is not uncommon, people make light of the situation to ease the tension, because it is not a comfortable thing for us to talk about our own deaths or the death of someone we love. So first thing is to talk about it and communicate that with them. Yes, Bob.
Let me just tell you, Michelle, just to I want to make it crystal clear that we have different possibilities. So we've had two different scenarios. One, somebody died in Washington, right, across the state line, and they simply had a local funeral director there take care of the transportation to the local funeral director here. Okay, that's one extreme. The other side is, you guys know Father Justin in Salt Lake, so I was just down there for his mother's funeral. Now here's what they did. They didn't want any funeral industry at all. So Father Justin, what he did, when his mother reposed, now she was in hospice, so when you're in hospice care, granted it's a little bit easier if you have a longer period when you know you're going to die. So they had the doctor from hospice sign the death certificate, or have the whole death certificate filled out, and just all he had to do was put his signature on at that moment, and it was turned over to the civil authorities. Now here's what happened. You have to go to the local coroner, to the local county person. If you don't have a death certificate with a doctor in hospice, for them that was the easy part, because they had that. But if it's a sudden death or in the hospital or something, you have to get the doctor to sign the death certificate. Then you have to get the local coroner to sign whatever, and Walter can talk about the details of this, but whatever the local transport document is needed, okay? Usually a certificate of transport or whatever it's called. So Father Justin, actually, when she died, I think early in the morning, and he sat for 3 hours in Salt Lake City. On the day his mother died, he had to sit there and wait for the officials so that he could get that transport, because she died in the house. You can't move the body at all until you have that. She died in the house, and then all the ladies, the ones who were involved with preparing the body, and they came. The ladies came, because she's a lady. I mean, if it was men, the men would come. They washed her. They washed her body in the Orthodox way, our tradition, and they dressed her. And I tell you, when I got there, I finally got there, I don't know, she was already laid out. They had done the memorials, the paniquitas, and all of that. They had her, and when there's no embalming, you have to tie the jaw, the jaw loosens. But they made it like a nice scarf, like a nice Orthodox head scarf. And rose petals all around. She was in white, like in her baptismal garment. Rose petals all around her on a white sheet. I said, this looks like Pascha. This is like Pascha. And Father Justin was getting the certificate. He had gotten the certificate so they could move her. Now this is going to sound a little bit less than elegant, but he had a guy in his parish who had a pickup truck, and it wasn't a full size. It was like, what do they call them? Short whatever, Gary, the short ones, you know what I mean? So the casket hung over the end. Now, and they needed that transport certificate even to move her from the house to the church even, to do the funeral, and to do the overnight, you know, whatever they were gonna do. Actually, she stayed overnight in the house, and we moved her body. A couple of the gentlemen came, and we moved her body into the casket. By the way, it was one of our caskets that we had made here, and Father Justin bought a couple of them years ago. One of our little pine boxes was used for his mom. And we put her in there, and then put her on the back of this half-size pickup, so they had to tie her in, you know, they had to strap her in real good. I said, you know what, I'll drive behind you. Just in case, because I don't want anybody taking your mom out on the freeway, you know? So we were behind them. Get to the church, they did the beautiful procession into the church, you know, they brought her body in for the funeral, for everything. We did the liturgy first, and then we did a beautiful memorial, etc. And then, after, like, he ate a quick meal, but then he and another guy, on that same, like, half of a pickup truck, drove her body from Salt Lake City, Utah, to the monastery in Texas. Across how many state lines? As long as you have that one, right, that piece of transport document, you can cross any state lines. Now, what he's talking about is Canada. Shelley, I'm thinking you need to die over here. When you're sick, we'll put a little bed in there, you know. You gotta get rid of all these requirements, okay? But for all state lines kind of thing, you just get the body here. No, not to cross Pine Box.
Father, you forgot about the dry ice.
Exactly.
Well, the dry ice,
That's
he's going to talk about
I
dry
know,
ice.
but you didn't
In
mention
order to preserve a body without embalming, the key is dry ice. And dry ice is not expensive. You can go to the Costco and get a bunch of dry ice. We have a Costco in Coeur d'Alene. You know, we'll send somebody there. It's not hard to get. And you change the dry ice every
As needed.
12 hours. It was like 8 hours, whatever it was. We changed the dry ice. And then we packed her in dry ice. I'm getting everybody all riled up here. We packed her in the dry ice even when we put her into the final for the long trip to Texas. And he told me that it was fine. The dry ice was fine for even a day. To get her.
They were never stopped?
They were never stopped. No. And if they were stopped, they have that document. This is my mom's travel certificate. I'm taking her to the monastery. And he didn't know if the abbess, Iorontes, got his message that the whole better be ready because we're bringing her down. They had it all ready and they did a beautiful burial there at the monastery. And no question.
Is there any difference if you put the body on a plane and fly it across the country?
There is some, again, this is one of those variables, depends on where they're receiving it. There's been times we have
Where
said,
they're receiving it or where the
where they're
person
receiving
died?
it. Not necessarily where they died, because here's the caveat, well, here's not a caveat. I'm trying to think of a scenario which, from my personal experience, there have been times when I have worked a funeral and someone to be transported to a funeral home in Los Angeles. All right?
Via plane,
The airport in Los Angeles. But depending on the city which the person was going to be received, required embalming before we put them on the plane or if we didn't. Now, a lot of airlines would rather you did. I'm vacillated about bringing some of these topics up, but part of the embalming process is an aspiration of the body. In other words, the human body has a lot of bacteria. Once it stops, those microbes are working. Exactly. And there's a process in which we aspirate a person that is used with a wand. You've ever seen procedures of liposuction?
Sure.
No, just take that to the interior cavity. And actually, this thing has a little sharp barb on the end of it, pulls, and it creates a vacuum, and it pulls out the gas and extra fluids, and pulls it out. And, there's been cases where we got people who are just really large, and after done, be somewhat normal semblance. That does help reduce the risk, because that pressure can build up, and there's fluid, it pushes out of orifices and everything, and it's a really foul stench.
Right.
So, some airlines will require that you actually do that And you can't just do that without embalming, because otherwise you're just opening up a lot of other problems later on that can cause a faster decomposition. So it depends also on the airlines, but they're slowly getting to requiring it across the board. However, there's one thing, if you ever do use a funeral home, and they're not, what are you talking about? Every funeral director has gone to school, has been educated about Jewish burial rites. And they say, oh, Jews don't embalm, we accept that. If they can do a Jewish funeral, they can do an Orthodox funeral. Simple. Hands down. Simple. Now, if you get them to understand that, and this is one of the things about what you were talking about a second ago, and this, what that contact list I'm talking about, those of you that are going to be involved with the guild doing this, get to know the local coroners on a first-name basis. And usually, like over in Flathead County, the sheriff is the coroner, and some of the under deputies or deputy sheriffs are deputy coroners as well. So being in the industry, I know them personally and be able to have a rapport with them. Get to know them, get to know the local funeral directors, and in case a situation like if you need to come over and they don't have a vehicle for it, you can talk to one of the funeral homes there and say, hey, what would it be for me to be transported to this point? Or build a relationship with these people, because there's going to be times you're going to need one, because you're going to say, if one of you is killed in a tragic car accident, that's going to be more than the average person is going to be comfortable with dealing with, especially if there's a lot of disfigurement, and stuff like that, or if somebody decapitated. I mean, I'm sorry, but these are realities. And it's sometimes, and every one of us have to come to the point and say, I can't do this, just accept it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's why it's good to have a good relationship with a funeral director and the coroners. Just build that. And once you have that, when the time comes, it's not catching them off guard. Because the guy who wrote this book has a podcast, and forgive me, it's almost like listening to a person as the same as watching paint dry. He's very monotonous. But he talked about a story in which, and I think it may even be in the book, that happened on a weekend, and he did not think about this man lived inside of another county, and he died there, and they were going to, the man agreed, the whole family understood, the church, the guilds were going to get the body, take it back, and clean, and wash and anoint and prepare for burial. This guy had not heard anything about it, and was not under any circumstance going to go against the grain and allow that to happen. Because he was the low man on the totem pole. It happened in the middle of the night on the weekend. He's on call. No, it's not happening, because he didn't know. It wasn't out of maliciousness. He just didn't want to risk a legal hurdle that could get him liable in his department. So that's why it's good to develop a relationship with these individuals. And if the case, it's, like say, for example, Father Justin, if they didn't have the capacity to drive, there are people that do transport services. I do that. Part of it is like if somebody dies there where we're at and they need to be flown to somewhere else, we have to go to Spokane because the airports nearby aren't big enough for the planes to have the cargo room to put a casket shipping container on. I have to drive, so I offer that transport service to the entire state of Montana. I'll go and move somebody. And so those services exist. And so with being across the state line, and for future reference for any of you as well. So, I have been pulled over before myself driving, but I didn't realize the sheet fell off the person's face, and his face was exposed, and I was in the back of a station wagon because he was so tall and had such a large abdomen, I couldn't see past the mirror. I'm driving down the road, and people just look at me. So I guess they could tell there was a body back there, but none of this guy's face was out there, and then I got pulled over by a highway patrolman, and he was looking up there, and he could see I was in a suit, and he says, your body's uncovered back here. And I was like, I got out and looked, oh. And I was so embarrassed because the guy was so tall, the zipper piece wouldn't go over him, so we had to put a sheet. Well, went down the road, lifted off, so that was the only time that I got pulled over. So that's, don't have to really worry about that, because a lot of times a cop pulls up, 9 times out of 10 they're going to know, well, there's a legitimate reason why there's a dead body back there, because most serial killers don't usually transport that kind of thing. So, and not that I would know anything about that. So, yeah, I'm sorry, you had your hand up a moment ago.
Yeah, I have a question about what Father Gregory said about the transport document and also what you said about Canada. So I asked them both now. So my question for Gregory, that was that question. My question.
Robin, turn your cell phone off.
I'm just turning it off. And then my question about Canada is, obviously if you live in Canada and you want to be buried here, you can make preparations with that special box and everything. But whether it's like, I'm just visiting Canada, I'm hiking, and then suddenly die, I don't have anyone up there, how then do you organize everything?
That can be tricky. This just happened maybe about 3 months ago. A man from Edmonton, Alberta, was riding in Glacier National Park. He just sold his Chevy dealership last fall, separated from his wife. Going to tour the country, the United States, all of North America, all the national parks. And he was, first national park he hit when he got into Montana was Glacier, had a heart attack, and head on with his motorcycle to another vehicle. And just because it was over the 4th of July, well, Canada Day up there, and 4th of July weekend was coming up, it was a fiasco. We couldn't get anything straight, and finally we got the death certificate, moved forward, and we had to drive him all the way to Edmonton. You know, 14-hour drive, basically, because it's north of Edmonton, just to get him there. There were so many different hurdles, we didn't know from one place to the next what to deal with, and luckily the owner, the funeral home, the guy he goes to church with, his brother, was an immigration officer for Canada, so he called him, he said, no, this is what you do, here's black and white, what you need. Now, since you live this close to the port, that's somebody else you need to get to know, is the immigration officials on this side of it. You know, for that, the scenario is if someone passed away in Canada, they can have an understanding what this is about. And you may be able to bypass this Ziegler case, this big galvanized thing. You may be able to bypass that. Okay, Uncle Sam doesn't know if they're not told, so to speak. And if you have a relationship with your neighbors, some people will understand in matter of trust. We still have that here in the Northwest, as opposed to some metropolitan areas that doesn't exist. So take advantage of the circumstances with that. But in the event of a death of that nature, if you're in a car accident or it's a sudden death, there are other legal issues to come through. There may be an investigation to determine if there's foul play. There's so many other circumstances come in, and that situation, to alleviate trying to figure out the hurdles of what to do, because if, say for example, someone is in Canada and is hiking and they find them a few days later after they fell down and there they are, they finally find them. Nature's already taken its course. Predators and scavengers are already doing their thing. You know, I'm not trying to be graphic, but this reality of it. And then there's not going to be a situation where just come on down here. You know, they're going to go back, try to recreate what happened, investigate this, and try to determine what to do at that point. And so, as an individual, and I say this, a layperson, if you will, coming from the industry, what would you do? Who would you contact? So, in that situation, it's best those people that already have the resources at their disposal to contact, you know, the funeral director. Because if you're trying to figure it out, man, a storage, you know, a cold storage facility, you're being charged for that daily. I mean, you know, because there's upkeep, you know, even if it's a municipal morgue or something like that, they're going to be charging for that. So in that scenario, there is no, if you already have a document drawn up for someone, potential death, and they die suddenly, you're going to be a suspect of some type of foul play. Like, well, why do you have this ready already? You know, so they're going to question that, and I'm not implying that you mean maliciousness by that. So I'm just saying, in a real world scenario, they're going to say, well, why do you already have this? So those things, but if someone who's been terminally ill, hospice care, nursing home, you know, those type of situations, it's good to have that and to let the staff know about that as well. So I don't know if I answered the question for that, and maybe jump around a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
I have a suggestion. Me, as a Russian Orthodox, my priest, Wayne Los Angeles, gave me a little icon to carry in my wallet. I had my name, full name on it, date of birth, Russian, what faith, Russian Orthodox. Who do you contact first? Father Dmitry Gizetti, the number. Second number is who you contact, is your loved one. And then you put, the third one was your doctor. And the bottom says, no embalming. I had this icon for a long, long time, but now I have to upgrade it to Father Gregory to put his name on it. It helps in my wallet. And also I have one in my car just in case of emergency. And
That
that,
reminds me, I forgot to bring some of these,
yes,
because you can pass this around. These are just little cards, business cards, that have that information on it. And so, and it's, you know, sometimes you see them,
That's what we are doing, but it helps to secure your feelings about the whole thing.
Yes.
Who you are.
Thank you, Lou. I think we are going to mix some of those up. I'll have Christina hold on this.
so definitely, and what's good about, and I kind of like this better than the ones that you just write on, that ink after time will wear off.
Yeah, I know.
I have these UV coated, cost a little bit more, bought like 200 or 300 of them. Hopefully they'll last. So I have a couple on me, a couple in each of our cars. All my kids have one in their backpack at school, so they have one with them. Even the schools know. I mean, I live there, so it wouldn't be a problem with that, but yeah.
And also being a nurse for many years, when I worked in the hospitals or in the nursing homes, we could not, if someone succumbs or falls asleep, you could not do anything with it, really. We couldn't wash it because if an restrained, we had to wash it no matter who you were. That's how it was. Nowadays, you don't. If you do, you get reprimanded. Or you have to call the coroner and they will take care of the rest of it, you know. But you can call your family who they were, because they said call your family first, but you cannot do that no more. Law is a law now. It depends on the administration.
Yes, and again, it goes from firm to firm too, sometimes, because what's happening, a lot of these care facilities are becoming owned by larger corporations.
Right.
And they'll have their own policies, and that's happening with a lot of hospitals. The Kalispell Regional Medical Center is buying up all the local practices, and it's become just one, even the hospitals in Whitefish is now owned by them. It's still got its own name.
Yeah,
But they-
it's sad.
Yeah, so they're putting everything under one roof, so to speak. And again, you're right, you know, there are times when you go into a facility and it's like, when was the last time they checked on this person? And there's other times you can tell, but it fluctuates, and also depends on the charge nurse and the nursing supervisor. Sometimes some of them will be on that. So again, it kind of fluctuates with that, but thank you for that. Glad you brought that up. I knew there was something else I'm forgetting. I thought I was so smart and I forgot some stuff.
Well, I just want to share this just because it's like that. Because we live so close to Washington, so close to Montana, so close to Canada, but live in Idaho, and that border up there can become really scary, because when I receive birds to rehab from Montana, Idaho, or Washington, it's not a big deal, because I know how to cover that. But when people bring a bird over that international border, I got the Border Patrol involved in it, the local vet involved in it. They end up having to be escorted back over the border. This is for a bird. I mean, just a bird. And by the time I got through understanding the process, I had the head of the Border Patrol in the state of Washington, and he threatened me. He said, if you receive a bird like that, you will go to prison. I mean, I thought, you've got to be kidding. So I can't, that's just for a bird, you guys. A songbird. So what you're saying is right. The international border is really...
Yeah, but be careful. You know, we're not afraid of the international border.
No,
okay?
exactly.
We just find the way to do it.
To do it right,
Yeah,
exactly.
and that's why it's good beforehand to be able to develop that relationship.
That's right, and
Because
see-
one of the things when it comes to moving, you know, stuff like livestock,
Yes,
animals,
all that
or
stuff.
plants, they worry about, because when I moved to Hawaii, you know, anytime I flew back out there, you had to disclose you don't have any fruit, you don't have any animals, anything like that. The ecosystem is very fragile. And, you know, you would think it's weird because even in Montana, if you cross the state line, they're worried about invasive species like the wolves. They're not going to notice an imaginary survey line here, but they still have that. And it gives some people some sense of
But see,
peace.
when I called up there, because I had been receiving birds, and I was breaking the law.
Yeah, let me just kind of get off of this though, about the international. So Shelley, here's the thing. If we find out that there's an impasse, like if it's just too hard, It probably isn't, but if it is, we can go up to Canada and bury you there. You know, we can do, you have priests and churches in your neighborhood right there too. So we can, I've done funerals in Creston, okay?
That's one of the things exactly.
It's the easier way if it becomes, I don't want to get too bogged down for, you know.
And that, I didn't tell that to do that, but I was trying to help people that snuck birds in or didn't know any better.
Yeah, but we're not going to be afraid. We're not going to be fearful.
No.
Okay.
I just have a very, excuse my ignorance, I'm a new convert recently. What is the Orthodox position on why we don't embalm? Is it because we desecrate the body? Is that right?
What was the question?
There we go.
I'm sorry, somebody was talking.
Well, as a recent convert, I don't really quite understand what the Orthodox position is on embalming and why it's wrong, or is it because it desecrates the body? That's what I'm assuming.
Embalming, okay.
Embalming. Sorry, did I?
You want to talk about that now?
Well, I mean, if she was asking more from a theological perspective.
Sure.
I mean, I can give you, can I just?
Why don't you tell them what happens in an embalming?
Okay. All right. I have off the side here.
No demonstrations, just tell us. Unless the monk wants to lay here.
You said we don't want to be fearful. We don't want to be fearful, Father. Okay, real quick. All right, the embalming process is a process in which preservatives and sanitation has taken place. Now, the author of the book says it's for sanitation, and which is frivolous because all that's preserved. That is incorrect. Embalming fluid preserves, however, the process of embalming itself helps sanitize and to reduce possible communicable diseases. Because there's some viruses and stuff. You worked in the field, so you know how many phlebotomists, right? Right?
No, manager.
Oh, excuse me then. So you're still familiar with some of the stuff. We don't know exactly when some of the diseases actually die at the airborne. I mean, we don't know for sure because some of the stuff is going to the ground, you know, water washing over, it's going to the aquifers. You know, we don't know some of these things. So the idea was that if we do this, we kind of help prevent this. So the primary process of embalming, this is going to become graphic, so I'll just forewarn you. I'll just give you a quick rundown. Okay, I have an authorization for someone to be embalmed. I'll put someone on the table and I will wash them. I will set their features, and what that includes, I will close their mouth and I will close their eyes. Closing the mouth is the part that I like the least. It's my least favorite part because it is very invasive to some extent. And it's a personal preference. We use what's called a needle injector. We will lower the lip and upraise the lip, and there's a small piece of metal. It's got a little point on it. Got a piece of metal wire around it, and we'll put it in a thing, and it will drive right into the bone over and over until you get rouge. And then do both sides. And I mean, that's very light because it's a loud crack. And I've done it with elderly people, and the jaw just shattered. Pop! And so, then I'd have to use a suture to get up inside the lip, around the jaw, and close it up. Then we will take a plastic mouth former to help keep the cheeks, especially if they make sure they have cancer drawn in, give them a little bit more lifelike feature. Then we'll put plastic caps, because the eyes sometimes dry and can cave in. We'll put them in. They're like large contacts that have little burrs on it. You'll lift an eyelid over it. And so when one eyelid slides, those little burrs kind of help pull that and keep it closed. Then we get the lips prepped, put a small thin line of super glue inside the eyelids and across the lip. Okay, then if it's a man, if he needs clean shaving, trim his eyebrows, nose hairs or whatever, trim up his beard. For a woman, you know, maybe get those, you know, couple unsavory, undesirable hairs that she probably plucked in her day-to-day life.
Those unsavory hairs.
Yes. get them cleaned up. And so then we'll go to that part, and then we will inspect the body. Before this happened, we've kind of done a washing with, you know, some antibacterial soap, microbial soap, antimicrobial. Anyway, we'll wash them down and get an idea of what the body looks like. Take into account if they have jaundice, you know, issues with kidney failures, if they've if their skin, what type of tissue, if the skin is, if it's very rigid, if it's soft, if they've already had rigor mortis, the other conditions that they have. So we take that into account. And then when it comes to the embalming, we make, generally, most typically, we make an incision right here near the carotid artery. We'll line up the clavicle, edge of the mouth, and run right down there, and we'll make an incision, because 9 times out of 10, the carotid artery and carotid vein are running right in that spot. We'll raise it, open that up, and we'll raise that up. The artery has an elasticity to it, kind of like overcooked calamari. It's got like a really thick rubber band. We'll raise that up, we'll separate that with these things called aneurysm hooks, separate the fascia. Then we have the artery and the vein. Very rare that's never been like together. There's been some deformities, some people that had to look around. But we'll pull that up and put what's called a bone separator. It's just a little, used to be a flat bone, a cattle bone, but now it's plastic, still called a bone separator. Put that under there, separate them. Then we'll put some suture around and some clamps ready to go, and we'll make a small incision into the artery, and we'll put this little tube that's hooked to a machine, an embalming machine, that pulses, kind of like the rhythm of a heart. And we'll open up the artery, excuse me, the vein at that point, and put a long set of forceps that reach to the aorta, because that's the central part where all the blood's going to go, so the coagulation will start there. Well, it will collect there rather, not start there, but it will collect there, because all of it's going back and forth through that point. So it's in there. So we put it in there, slide it, opens it up, so we're able to grab any clots and pull it out. Now, the heart's not beating, so when this machine comes on, it's pushing the blood out, and it's replacing it with these chemicals. It's running through the capillaries, and what we do, we kind of lubricate the body with liquid soap, massage the body, get the fluids to pass through. We'll look at the nails, the fingernails and everything to make sure there's pink, because sometimes they'll turn dark brown or blue. We'll get a bit of a pink, massage it in, and try to make sure, we'll massage the body, move blood up, and try to get everything out as we can until we really don't see any more blood left. And it's just more or less fluid coming out. And then after that's done, we'll stop, turn around, and do one final injection, because the body is getting most of it, and even the head. But because of where it's positioned, this side doesn't get it, so we have to stop, turn the machine off, lower the pressure, and then put it up here. Because if we do the same pressure, there's been some tragedies happen, deformity, because somebody didn't watch the pressure, forget a step, and then you have a huge mess on your hands. So then you'll put some fluid on that side of the body. And after it's done, you tie everything off, take your equipment away, you dry everything up, and then you basically stitch them up, closed up. And then you do what we talked about a minute ago, the aspiration. Take that one and you put it in there and you go to town. And that's because it's the first couple times you ever do it, you're feeling things rip as you're going back and forth, and you're doing it and you're seeing fluid come out. And
Okay, so
you're emptying out as much excessive fluid.
You close the cavities also as well?
What's that? What cavity?
All the body cavities?
I'll get to that in just a second here at the very last, because that is the most, should we say, violating, if you will, is the only word I can use of it. Because a lot of this seems, I've always said, even when I first started doing this, that if people knew the barbarity to what this looks like, they may not say, oh yeah, I'll be involved. It's like, ugh.
I have no idea how basic.
Oh my gosh, I thought you said I had it done to me.
This is with a typical case. Average person, fairly healthy individual may have had a coronary and they died, or what have you. Just, that's a typical case. Some cases, we may have to do multiple points. We may have to go into the axillary of the arm to make sure the arm gets fluid, or go in the femoral artery to make sure the leg gets it. Or sometimes you have to.
Is that all for aesthetics? Is that all for aesthetics? Present the body during a service?
Not just that, but it's also for retardation and decomposition. So that will help retard it won't stop it. Yeah, there we go.
And then is that why there's no odor?
Why we hope there isn't any odor, it can still be odor. But in cases in which I have embalmed people, then 2 days later, the body's just not, the pH is just not working. It's not balancing with them. Because we study, someone goes to become a licensed mortician, they study a lot of chemistry, but really it's recipe making, because it's what blend of chemicals, of what concentration for this particular person's, individual pH level. People that have had cancer, you know, you have to be a little bit different approach to them. Someone who is, there's people who has had a lot of edema, there's fluid